Before you ask me if this story is make-believe, ask me first if I think this world is real. Tales of the Airship Neverland, a steampunk fairy tale. Based on the novel by John R. White. Directed by Micheal Shea and John R. White. Original music by John Magnificent. Featuring performances by Amy Heard, Marq Speck, Courtney Zimmer, and Christopher Williams. Episode 11. Come with me.
The cell was not a big one, nor could it be expected to be. It was for lunatics and the more recalcitrant prisoners, ones that had to be separated from the rest. 2 constables stood outside the cell. The first, Towns, was in his late 40s, though experience had made him look much older and wearier. He had seen many things in the years at his post. You could see the effect as they etched his features with every new crease and wrinkle that aged his weathered face. Eric's, though younger, had just as much heart and commitment to his position as his partner. Towns thought to himself as he finished securing a lock on the iron door and laced a chain through the thick bars of the cell door frame. The years will catch up with Eric's, too. They always do.
Right. Locked up good and proper. Hand me the second one, Eric's.
There you are.
There we go. The cell's all locked up nice and tight. That'll teach you, mate. Getting all nasty like that earlier. That's why we're locking you in down here. This is where we keep them prisoners what be loonies or get a little violent. So don't you be thinking you'll be able to get away with that again.
It's a bit creepy, isn't it, Sounds? Just sitting there, cracking his neck like that. Not a squeak from him otherwise.
Quiet one he is. Sure enough. But what was all that kicking and spinning now, lad? You look like a top on ice. Are you a ballerina or something?
The prisoner said nothing. He merely continued sitting on his stool. The heavy chains of his manacles clanked with an odd musical quality as he tilted his head back and forth, creaking and popping his neck. It echoed back darkly off the cold dampness of the bare stone walls. The man was hard to see, even up close, his black uniform and even darker leather jerkin melting him into the shadows of his cell, like ink poured on black velvet.
No, probably not. You shouldn't have broke Officer Charles' leg like that. It was a wee bit if not necessary. Now Constable Charles is going to have to go get his knee all set at the doctor's. He's getting married this weekend. How can a man not dance with his bride on her wedding day? A shame. Just a bleeding shame.
He's to be a groom? Son of a bitch.
This unexpected display of sorrow momentarily shook the constables, their preconceived notion of the prisoner's cold and callous demeanor shaken with this sudden show of humanity.
Aye, getting married to a fine young lass. He's a good and proper gentleman, he is. Just 1 year on the beat. Honest, loyal, true. The very motto of the Queen's Bobby. Neither a drinker nor a lout is our brave Master Tim.
Alistair sighed and leaned back, rapping his head against the damp stone walls.
I am sorry. Please, tell the good officer's fiancé I do apologize.
Oh, I'm sure that will please her to hear. It'll make her wedding night just that much more joyous as she tries to bed her crippled husband. You're right fine get you are. Hope you do all that nice dancing and spinning on the end of the rope, you bloody bastard.
The prisoner said nothing more, but the old constable was quite sure he saw a tear at the corner of the man's eye. Meanwhile, outside, the skies above London had been clear, but those gentles and lovers who were prone to watching the skies at night saw a rather sudden electrical storm form. It developed quickly and seemed to move almost against the wind. A lone lorry driver who had been looking upon the rapidly forming storm thought to himself, odd. for bolts of lightning were silently striking from the heavens without the slightest sound of thunder. Elsewhere, Officer James Percival John McTavish III sat at the grand public desk in Scotland Yard and cursed the man who invented paperwork. He really wished he could meet the gin-pot that thought that one piece of paper was not enough. No, one had to send each man-jack in charge the same piece of paper. So he wrote and wrote, and thanked the stars that the Chancellor of the Exchequer said they could get one of the newfangled typeset machines. They were going to send some lad over who had been trained on it. That's the spirit, he thought wryly to himself. Let the young lads do the papers. Then he could get back to real police work. He dipped his pen in the inkwell and heard a woman's voice. Looking down from his bench, his first thought was to wonder what it would be like to dip his pen in that well. She was lovely, with thick black hair under a lacy bonnet, wearing a nice deep blue dress that bustled out about her. She had on a black nightcape and, oddly enough, was unaccompanied. Not wise in this part of town in the evening, McTavish thought. Still in all, she's at the yard.
Can I help you, love?
I've come to pick up a man named Alistair.
Oh, poor dear. Looks like you could use a cup of water.
He offered her one. The woman smiled and accepted. As she slowly sipped the water, McTavish couldn't help but notice her eyes and the way they moved about, as if she seemed to be taking in the room. Though why she might be doing so, he couldn't fathom. McTavish smiled at her and searched his forms and prisoner roster for the man she had inquired about.
We have no one here by that name, lass. What might he have been nicked for?
Well, I do believe he was probably arrested for fighting and the like. He's a tall man, stout in heart, and with a penchant for dark clothes. He might have had a black face mask.
The bobby nodded, rang a bell, and a young officer came in from the back where he had just disappeared to only a moment earlier. McTavish gave the man the prisoner's description, and the officer nodded, checked his own list, and offered a name.
Ma'am, would a Mr. Shadow mean anything to you?
The lady looked up suddenly, an odd look on her face.
He's given no name. Just said, and I quote, "I am a shadow." Kind of daft, if you be asking me.
That's him. I'm sure of it. May I bond the man out, officers?
The two officers conferred for a moment before turning back to the black-haired woman.
I am sorry. It seems that he's to be taken before the magistrate in the morning. He crippled a constable last night. I'm to be thinking he's either a date with a rope or the Isle of Wight at best.
The lady seemed upset at that answer. McTavish leaned over and patted her gloved hand in an effort to console her.
There, lass. A beauty such as yourself could find a nice, respectable...
He never finished the sentence, as the lady had grabbed him by the throat, tightly.
No, this will not do. I want Mr. Shadow, and I want him right now.
McTavish reached for his nightstick. Wendy did not like that she was on occasion a bit quick on the draw. She had been told time and time again that her emotions clouded her judgment. She sighed and pulled the officer over the bench with her hand that was gripping his throat. She dropped to be in the junior copper's way, took advantage of the moment while he had to step over the gasping constable, and cast off her robe. Her hands pulled out two cutlasses she had secreted under there, and then, turning, ran up the wall and flipped over them. The junior officer watched as her leather-clad and booted legs belied the false train that hid them. Spinning in the air, she cleft his oak billy club in two and landed on the unconscious McTavish's desk. The young bobby went for his whistle, and Wendy kicked him in the face, rending him unconscious before he had a chance to sound the alarm. She tried to remember the map she had read that Uno had kept in his locker, and then, dropping down, took the brass key ring off the young man lying on the floor. She kissed his cheek and apologized before disappearing down the hallway.
Sorry.
The prison dock was actually fairly quiet. It was midweek, and most trouble took place on the week's end, as most working men were too tired to get into much trouble except on the Sabbath. Windy ran down the hall, passing the hoots and howls of doxies, trollops, and drunks. She came to the end of the hall when she saw one bluebelly flirting with a soiled dove, trying to get a bit of what for. He saw her and did a double take when he realized she was wielding crossed blades.
See here now, miss.
Windy threw one cutlass and pinned the constable to the wall through his shoulder. The impact wouldn't kill, but it was unlikely he'd play the same game of cricket again. Windy slammed up against the amorous lout and held the other blade against his rather thick throat, the blade leaving a sharp impression against his fleshy wattle. Officer Clark winced in pain. Clark was in his mid-30s and was known for the crooked smile that played cruelly across his face. A man used to abusing his power to get his way was now as helpless as a pinned butterfly. Now his normally cruel countenance could only express pain and abject terror.
Now I shall ask this once, and only once. Where shall I find a prisoner known as Mr. Shadow?
Upstairs, one turn right. He's in a lunatic bin. He ain't been hurt, I'll tell you that. He's a bad no lie. Now be a good lass, and pull out the blade that hurts fierce.
Windy pulled the sword from the man and the oaken door jamb that it had embedded into. Clark held a hand to staunch the blood flow. Windy took the opportunity to knock him down and out with a quick hit to his head from the pommel of her knife, and then, pulling a cloth kerchief quickly, bound the flowing wound. It took a few valuable moments, but she didn't want the man, however repugnant, to die. She ignored the horror's entreaties to be freed as she silently moved to the top of the stairs, whereupon she came to a locked gate. It was double-locked, and Windy sighed, as she had to waste more valuable time rifling through the guard's key ring to find the right combination of keys. The gate creaked open, and the chains rattled to the floor. She rushed in to see her quarry, leaning against the wall, bound in a straitjacket. She bent down and softly held his grizzled face, a single tear betraying her composure.
Alistair?
Upon receiving no response from the restrained Alistair, she now roughly shook him and slapped his face. His eyes flickered open, and she saw that they were hazy with stupor. Looking around, her eyes settled on a small bottle on a shelf outside the door. Grabbing it, she read the label.
Laudanum? Damn it!
With a sigh of resignation, she moved to the window, reached under her bodice, and retrieved a small device. Sticking her hand out the window, Windy flashed a small beacon toward the clouds. She saw an answering and corresponding series of twinkling lights. Moving back to Alistair, she cut the straps on the straitjacket and freed him from the cumbersome restraint. She shook him again, harder. A klaxon began to wail deep within the prison. The alarm had been sounded.
Alistair! Alistair! We don't have time! Wake up!
Alistair shook his head, as if trying to arouse himself from a long slumber upon hearing her familiar voice.
Winifred?
Yes, my dear, it's me. Now come, my love. It's time to go.
Quickly and efficiently, Windy cut the now rousing Alistair free from his restraints. Outside the window, there was a sound of a tiny metallic fluttering, accompanied by the rustle of ropes. Then, abruptly, a slight thud sounded against the wall.
Ow! Damn it!
Windy moved to the window as two slight gloved hands grabbed the bars, and a tiny, pretty young face poked in.
Sorry. Oh, Tink, never mind that. Did you bring it?
Tink nodded and rested a small bag on the window. She popped out a match and lit the strings.
Better move back. It's going to be pretty.
Suddenly, a massive explosion ripped through the cell, causing the entire outer wall to vanish as if by magic. Windy hurled herself over Alistair, shielding him from the rocks and granite shards flying about. Once the smoke had cleared enough to see, Alistair looked up from beneath Windy.
What was that?
There was a giggle. And Alistair looked outside the hole. A young blonde girl hovered in the air, suspended by a pair of rapidly beating clockwork wings.
Fairy dust?
Grabbing Alistair, Windy carried him to the breach. There, Tink handed her captain the rope and secured the newly freed man about the waist.
Okay, Tink. Now get us the hell out of here!
All three quickly ascended up into the lightning storm. There, in the flashing clouds awaiting them, was a colossal airship, easily the size of the prison they had just escaped. Trailing behind, Tink looked down at the city and couldn't help but notice the moon's beautiful reflections on the water below.
Ooh, shiny.
Tales of the Airship Neverland, Episode 11, was directed by Micheal Shea and John R. White, with continuity by Anne-Marie Carter-Lamphere, and original music by John Magnificent, with vocal performances by Amy Heard as Windy, Marq Speck as Alistair, Courtney Zimmer as Tink, Christopher Williams as Peter, and narrated by Tony Semanik, with additional performances by Jason Miller, Eric Johnson, Anne-Marie Carter-Lamphere, John R. White, and Joan Buford. Tales of the Airship Neverland was recorded at K&R Studio in Southfield, Michigan, with sound design by Ken Glaser and Micheal Shea. To find out more about Tales of the Airship Neverland and to order both your books and audio drama episodes, visit airshipneverland.com. Tales of the Airship Neverland will return with Episode 1, Hook's Massacre.